Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening. My name is Roseanne Santos. I am the Director of Alumni Engagement at John Jay College. I have been in my role, I have been in my role for 3 years, but I have been at the college for 10. And I just want to share with you what we do, a little bit of what we do at the college in alumni engagement. Number one is exactly how it sounds. I engage alums from all walks of life, all regions around the country, all graduation dates, to share their time and talent and wisdom with graduating students, new alumni, and alumni who just are interested in whatever the topic of the day is. And today's topic of the day is forensic mental health counseling. We have 4 alumni with us tonight who are going to share their experiences, everything that they're doing currently, and hopefully answer any of the questions that you may have as the evening progresses. So with that, if you have any technical issues or any questions that have to do with Zoom, please message me privately through the Zoom chat feature, and I will do my best to assist you behind the scenes. That way the conversation can continue uninterrupted. Otherwise, at this point, I want to thank my colleague, Naomi Naistat, who agreed to moderate this evening, and I'm handing the mic and the show over to her at this point. Thank you again for being here, and I hope you enjoy the program.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Naomi Naistat. I'm the Assistant Director of Master's Program Career Advisement for the Department of Psychology. I support students with externship advisement and career guidance. And some of you definitely know me, others who do not, welcome. Just to kind of give a little bit more information about forensic mental health counseling, it's unique in the sense that it really is an intersection between mental health and the law. And the panelists this evening are going to talk about what their careers entail, their journey of how they got to where they are today. And we're all alumni from this program, so they all were where you were at one point. So I think it's going to be a great opportunity for you to really learn about what you can do with your FMHC degree. So we're going to get started. So the first question, I'm just going to go to the person who's next to me, who's actually on this as well. So please tell us more about yourself, what you currently do, and what inspired you to get your FMHC master's degree from John Jay. So if you want to start first, actually, let's first go around and just introduce ourselves, and then we'll go through and answer those additional questions.
I'm Will. I'm an OPC. I'm based in New Jersey. I finished the program in 2015. I currently work overnights answering crisis calls, and I'm also a business owner for a life coaching business that's run by therapists called Mental Wealth Coaching.
Thank you. Amy?
My name is Amy D. Simon. I graduated from John Jay FMHC program at the end of 2018. I just became licensed as a mental health counselor at the beginning of this year in January of 2021. I currently work at Fifth Avenue Forensics. We do a variety of different forensic evaluations. I work as a mitigation specialist, and I also do psychotherapy on the side as well.
Thank you. Shamara?
Hi, my name is Shamara Nicholas. I'm a licensed mental health counselor with a preventive service through ACS called HANOC. We service children and family counseling programs. And I'm currently in the process of being course licensed for an LPC program in Virginia at Five Works, where I would work with a private practice on the weekends.
And Chris?
Hi, everybody. How are you? My name is Chris. I graduated in 2016 from the FMHC program. I got my license back in 2019. Currently, I am not working as a counselor. I'm actually working as a police officer with the NYPD, but I do hope one day to get back into working as a counselor.
Great, thank you. Chris, if you want to continue on, and I know you mentioned that you work for the NYPD, if you want to talk a little bit more about that, and again, what inspired you to get your FMHC degree from John Jay?
Sure. Actually, from the time I was a young kid, I knew I really wanted to be a police officer. But Going into school, I actually started as a psych major in the College of Staten Island. Then I found out about forensics and forensic psychology, so I transferred to John Jay, and I graduated with my bachelor's with forensic psychology in 2014. But I knew that was very broad, and I knew I wanted to focus a little bit more or specialize a little bit more into the clinical track and clinical field. So that actually inspired me to start looking into different programs, and I saw that John Jay had a forensic mental health counseling program, and it was a master's level, which meant that I could work as a clinician, and that was one of the main things that pushed me into going into the clinical track at John Jay.
Great, thank you. And Shamara?
I started off in John Jay in forensic psychology as with my bachelor's. And then while I was doing that, before doing the BA/MA program for forensic psychology, I started reading up more on the forensic mental health track because I wanted to be a clinician. So when I realized that it would be easier to do forensic mental health counseling and get my credentials, I decided to use that track instead of the forensic psychology track.
Amy?
Kind of like the other two, I graduated from John Jay undergrad with humanities and justice. I initially wanted to go to law school, but then I kind of, as I was going through the process of applying, I realized that law school, being a lawyer, wasn't for me, but this was kind of, I still wanted something very much in the legal field, that I wanted more kind of direct connection with people. So then the more research I did, I found this program, and this was like everything that I wanted. So I chose to do the FMHC. I wasn't sure if I was going to go on, but I wanted to do something that would be license eligible in a shorter amount of time, and then maybe, you know, work as a clinician while pursuing further. And that's how I got here.
Thank you. And Will?
So I started working in the field when I was 19 at a behavioral school for children who were removed from their schools due to emotional and behavioral needs. So I've always had a knack for mental health and working in nonprofits and things like that. I got my bachelor's in psychology, and I just didn't know what type of therapist or clinician I wanted to be. I was always in the helping professions. And I actually had a cousin who was at John Jay for undergrad, so I was familiar with programs, and I was always interested in forensic psychology in terms of like the school and prison pipeline and profiling and different things like that. So it just kind of made sense.
Thank you. So I want to touch briefly upon licensure. This is a complex topic which could take a whole panel, which actually we do offer in the spring. So I know some of you are licensed in New Jersey, some of you are licensed in New York, and tomorrow you're looking to get also licensed in Virginia. So as individuals who are licensed, if you could go back, what is one thing you would have done differently when first applying for your limited permit and then searching for your first job to accrue those 3,000 hours towards licensure? So instead of talking about the entire process, talk about what you, again, educates the people who are watching so they know and can learn from what you guys have done. So Amy, if you want to start this one.
Yeah, so during my master's program, I interned at Fifth Avenue Forensics, and I was really lucky to get hired from them after I graduated. But the one thing that I will say is that they do strictly forensic assessment. We're in the process now that I'm licensed and I'm doing psychotherapy outside to bring a treatment side to the practice. But through going through this process, I got really great assessment experience. There's still a lot of rapport building, a lot of skills that translate to therapy, but I didn't have specific, you know, therapy, psychotherapy, one-on-one experience. I had done, and I wanted to mention, crisis text line is a really good, like while I was working through my master's, it's a really good way to get crisis experience. It's a text line, so there's always a supervisor on, you have like 7 minutes to respond. It's a good way to get those kind of basic counseling skills. but I didn't have really the face-to-face therapy experience through where I was through where I had my permit. So then I ended up getting a second job doing psychotherapy on the side to get that experience that I'm now bringing to my job. But I would just say to make sure that the placement that you're at has exactly what you want for, where you see yourself down the line, so that you're getting the most comprehensive experience for what your end goal is.
And when you first were interviewing or just looking into Fifth Avenue forensics to get your outsourced licensure, were you aware that that piece was missing and that you would have to go outside and do two places?
So when I was looking for an internship or externship site, I initially just thought I wanted to do treatment. And then the more I saw of assessment, I was like, this is really cool. This is really interesting. They do such a wide variety of it. So I wanted to find a world where I could do both, but it just, I had to find that psychotherapy experience outside of it. Because I really do enjoy doing both things.
Thank you. And Will, if you could talk about what your experience was, and do you have a New York license as well, or do you just go and apply directly for the license, the LPC in New Jersey?
So because I went to the program in New York, my requirements were a little different in New Jersey. So I did have to take, I think there was like one additional class I had to take at an institution here, which was not a huge deal. And then I think the requirements are pretty comparable. We have to do, we have to take the exam, the national counselor exam, and then you have to take, do your 4,500 hours, and 1,500 from the internship can count towards that. So it's really like 3,000 hours, which breaks down to be almost 3 years, because they put all these limits on how many hours you can do each week, each month, each year. So just being aware of that, and the fact it is a privilege to get this license. It costs a tremendous amount of money to maintain this license and to get continuing education units and to pay the licensing renewal fees, even when you don't have your full professional license. Even when you just have your temporary license, you still have to pay for the renewal, at least in New Jersey. So just bearing that in mind, it is a cost, and there is a lot of gatekeeping. Whereas in other professions, if you're a doctor in New Jersey, you're a doctor in Pennsylvania, you're a doctor in California, you're a doctor. When you're a therapist or a clinical social worker, it's just for that one state. And now I think there are some states in the South where they're trying to, because they're more rural, and they learned a lot with the pandemic. People are far apart. So they're having, I think, I forget what states it is, but there's a few states in the South that when you're licensed in one, you're now you can apply to be licensed in 2 or 3 others. So yeah, just bearing that in mind. And like what Amy said, you're not going to get everything from one internship. So like I was lucky to work in a forensic setting and do assessments, but I also do treatment and work with people who had intellectual and developmental disabilities, and people who had severe and persistent mental illness, people who had schizophrenia, bipolar, all different diagnoses. So just bearing that in mind to figure out what you want to do for like the next 5 to 10 years, get as much experience as you can. I don't know about everybody else, but I had to be able to get paid at my internship. So it wasn't an option for me to work for free. So I worked 2 or 3 jobs at a time to get that varied experience, and to also get, to pay for all this. It's expensive to become a therapist.
Thank you. And Shamara, can you talk about something that you learned from your experience of getting licensed, and now you're doing it all over again for Virginia? Virginia, right?
Yes, for Virginia, the cross licensing process is actually easier than I thought it would be. But for me, I think I kind of lucked out because I like doing research in advance. So I already had an idea of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to work. So the licensing part for me was easy because my supervisor and mentor was recently licensed. So she was able to guide me through the process in regards to it. So I worked at an alternative to incarceration program. So I was able to run groups and also do individual counseling, and then the agency had a clinic attached to it. So I was able to navigate that. So it kind of worked in my benefit. So it wasn't really a hassle for me. The only thing I wish I could have done differently was to have done the exam earlier through my permit rather than after being established, because it's difficult after you've gotten all the experience. When you come to do the exam, it's difficult to try to separate what you know by working hands on with clients based on what the textbook wants you to say. So I really wish that I did it earlier. I tried to cram the DSM-5. That was not a good idea. So, and I walked into the exam with a lot of anxiety. So I wished I knew before, like, try to do the exam earlier in your permit than before.
And Chris?
So I would say, I think the question was what I would do differently. I'm sorry, Naomi, can you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted. Yes, so basically, the process is very cumbersome and very confusing. So what I'm trying to just have the audience learn is something that you would have done differently now that you're licensed that you didn't know when you were applying for the license.
Okay. So kind of also like Shamar, I definitely agree. I really wish I didn't take as long to take the exam. I think between the time period between me finishing my hours and actually taking the exam was maybe a good couple of months. It doesn't seem like a long time, but working full time for a few years and then waiting a few more months before taking the test, it kind of made it a little bit more difficult to separate what they want you to do for the test and versus real world application. Because like Shamara said, what you learn through experience is not how they want you to answer questions on the test. And sometimes it was hard to separate that. And then the other thing I wish I learned was, or did differently, was that I interned at the YMCA Counseling Center on Staten Island. It was and still is a substance abuse treatment center, and they're an outpatient site. So there were people coming in every day, and I was very fortunate to be hired there part time. But I was very focused on trying to work really hard and getting a full time position. So I kind of took my time trying to find a full-time position because I was under the impression that they would switch me over to full-time. But by the time I realized it, not that much time had passed, but I kind of wish that I had started earlier looking for a full-time position so that I could accrue my hours even earlier. It was only I was only there part-time for a few months before I found a full-time position. And even then, I think it was important for me to realize that case management was also a position that fulfilled the requirements to being for the hours to count for licensure. And I didn't want to do case management because I wasn't interested in it. But at the end of the day, for me, it was something that counted towards my hours, and it's something I should have just said to myself, just do it for a little bit, get the experience, also get the hours, because you are still going to learn the same way. And eventually, it actually turned out that I was having more clinical experience, I was doing more clinical work, and I was actually having my own caseload. So that's one of the other things I wish I would have done differently. Don't be afraid to look a little bit outside of my expectations for a job.
Really briefly, I want you guys to talk a little bit about your career journey. So how you got to where you are today, and where do you see yourself next going, let's say the next few years. So Shamar, if you want to start this one.
So my career journey started in social services. I started as a clinical case coordinator. So I was working with high-risk clients, and then I got promoted to a supervisor. So I kind of wanted to have direct client contact. So I had to debate my way through that because I don't want to ever lose, because the higher you go, the more paperwork you have to do, and there's less client contact. So I was able to continue doing that. But then after I got my license, and as Will stated, this is an investment, it's extremely expensive. So I wanted to make sure that I got into more of a clinical setting, a more therapeutic setting. So I moved from social services to a more clinical based setting, because you want to make sure that you're doing something that you're passionate about and you're still upholding your license. Granted, social services, you're able to do it, but then there was a kind of a conflict because my supervisor was an LMSW. I wouldn't be able to get the clinical supervision that I need as an LMHT to maintain my status. So these are things that we have to be mindful of in regards to our journey. And then in regards to where I see myself, within the next 2 years, I'm gonna start looking into beginning my PhD. I wanna get my PhD in counseling, supervision, and education with a concentration on children and families.
Well, good luck with that. It's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Chris?
So right now, as I mentioned, I am a police officer with the NYPD, and that is something I really hope to continue doing. But I also really hope to get back into counseling, and my goal is to also eventually open a private practice that caters to first responders, because that is something that I've been seeing that a lot of first responders are suffering and they are taking very, very drastic measures to end their pain, and that's not something that should be happening. So I do want to open a private practice and have it catered to first responders first, and then anyone else who needs help would definitely be welcome. But definitely, I want to help. I want to help back. I want to give back some help to first responders.
Yeah, definitely needed, especially now. Will?
So I've been fortunate in my career to do a lot of different things. I've worked as a behavior specialist, clinician with various forensic populations, adults, children. I've worked in residential treatment programs, lockdown facilities with hospitals. I've worked for the Children's System of Care in New Jersey, triaging phone calls from parents and children, I guess youth aged 18 to 21 to get them services when they're in crisis or needing therapy, what have you. And now I work for Horizon overnights. I'm a pre-cert clinician, so I admit people to the higher levels of care for detox, residential, inpatient, as well as answer crisis calls. And then during the day, I'm actually one of those social media therapists. I'm a TikTok and Instagram therapist, and I've started a life coaching business with some other influencers that I, strangely enough, met on the internet. So that's what we do in the pandemic. The whole field is changing. Mental health is changing, so we're changing with it. And yeah, my hope is to continue to grow that business in the next couple of years, continue to do interviews and publications and things like that to fight stigma.
So I started at Fifth Avenue Forensics when I graduated as an assistant to the owner, who was a forensic psychiatrist. When I got my limited permit, I started doing all of the biopsychosocial portions of the evaluations. And then when the pandemic happened, I got a second job doing psychotherapy. It was completely remote. So I was doing both, and I still am doing both of those things. So it's been quite a bit, but now that I'm licensed, I have my own caseload as a mitigation specialist for some cases I'm doing. We have a really big case right now that we're doing psychological damages in light of the Child Victims Act. So we have a group of 50 plus men who were abused in childhood that we're evaluating. So I've been doing all the biopsychosocial pieces of that. And we've found that this is kind of a niche population that is really in need, male child sex abuse victims. So now that I have this experience with therapy, I started doing therapy with some of these men, and it's kind of blossomed from there. So I'm now in the process of developing the treatment side at Fifth Avenue Forensics, and plan to continue doing that.
Thank you. Yes, and I do echo what Roseanne said. You guys are all doing some amazing things with some very interesting populations. So kind of switching gears a little bit and talking about opportunities, I'm sure individuals who are watching are wondering, how do I go about searching for my first job when I do graduate? And I think what's unique about this is when our students are graduating with their FMHC degrees, they're applying for positions where they're going to earn their hours towards their license. So they have to work for certain organizations, have certain job responsibilities, and work underneath a licensed professional for their 3,000 hours. So what are some kind of tips you can offer in searching for career opportunities for people listening to this call, as well as some ideas of different places you think students may pursue to search for jobs? So Will, if you want to start this one.
Sure. So when you take the exam, one of the parts of the exam is career counseling. So just as something we learn as we're studying and preparing for that exam is that you're only going to be in a field for in a very specific field for 5 to 10 years. So just like figure out what your values are for the next 5 to 10 years. Is it more important for you to have flexibility in your job? Is it more important for you to have work to life balance, time with family, make money? It really depends on what your values are, and don't wait until the time comes to start looking. Priority management is something I prefer to time management. So figure out what's important for you and prioritize that in your search, and look at nonprofits, look at really anywhere. I don't want, like, you want to get paid because nobody wants to work for free. So if you can take your internship and springboard that into a job, a lot of us have been fortunate enough to do, that's kind of the best way to do it. But apply for things that you don't think you're qualified for. Apply for everything and just put yourself out there. And yeah, network is huge.
Thank you. Shamara?
I will definitely echo what Will said. Networking is very important. You have the opportunity in FMHC to have an externship. So with your externship, you can decide, okay, do I want to continue with that population? Is there any specific diagnosis that I would like to work with? And you can do one of two things: talk to your supervisor at your externship, find out if there's any vacancies, or look to see if there's any similar programs to your externship that you could start looking at. So for my externship, I worked with adults at Bronx Task Mental Health Court. And then I was like, probably I want to do adolescents instead, which is where I found cases, and I worked with the adolescent population for ATI. So definitely try to look up similar positions to your externship to see what it has. But the main thing you need to do when you go on interviews, you need to ask, will there be somebody that is going to be able to supervise me with my limited permit? Because if you don't ask that question, then you're going to get stuck in a position, and then you're going to have to start looking for other careers, because those 3,000 hours, it takes about 2 years to get those hours. So you want to be able, as soon as you step in that door, to be able to get those hours, because the process takes a while. It takes a while. It's even longer now during COVID to get approved for your permit. So you want to be able to know when you walk in that door the Thursday, you're going to get somebody to sign that paperwork so you could submit your application for your limited permit.
And not only that, but you also want to find out how many additional limited permit holders they're supervising, because they can only supervise five.
Yes.
Yep. So if you're number 6, they can't
Nope.
supervise.
And then that operating certificate and waiver is extremely important, because some agencies, they don't know where they have it sometimes. So you have to just make sure that it's there. So I like asking questions. So these is when they ask, is there any questions that you have in the interview? It's okay to ask those questions, because you're trying to make sure that your career path is set.
Thank you. Amy?
Yeah, going off of what Will and Shamara said, really the best opportunity is taking advantage of wherever you get yourself into. Somebody told me in my undergrad, one of my mentors, like, really use whatever internship you get, to try to get a job, and obviously that's not always possible, but to the extent that you can, as you're looking for externships, maybe ask, what is the possibility of being hired after this? We definitely, I know at my office, we love promoting from within. We're expanding at a rapid rate. We would prefer to promote people and to hire people that we've trained from day one. That's how I was hired. That's how, everyone, it's been just really expanding exponentially over the past 3 years. And it really does, if you have a genuine interest, just put in the effort to set yourself apart, show the interest, ask those questions, because it really does make a difference. And more often than not, I think companies are more willing to hire, would prefer to promote from within. So really take advantage of those opportunities.
Thank you. And Chris?
God, everyone said all the great points I really wanted to make already, but for it really is important to know what you are going, like what it's really important to know what you're getting yourself into. And when I say that, I mean, like when I was applying for jobs and looking for positions that would count towards my licensure, I really made it a point to read every job description so that sometimes the job position it's a little deeper, like the description is a little deeper than what the title is. So one of the jobs I applied for, it was case management, and I thought case management was not going to fit what I really needed and what I was looking for. But I read the job description; it actually was very clinical, and it had everything, pretty much all I needed: treatment plans, client contact, case formulation. Um, Pretty much a lot of requirements that were needed. It kind of everyone was kind of checked off. And then, like Shamara said, when I went in for the interview, I made it a point to really find out if there would be a supervisor on site that could supervise me for a weekly supervision, and made sure that that would also count towards the requirement for licensure. Um, and I think that was really one of the more important things that I had to do when I was applying for different positions. Just being thorough and making sure that everything I needed would be in what I was applying for, and not getting caught up in what I thought I needed to look for.
So I'm going to open up to some Q&A now. There are a few questions I saw, Chris, that you were answering some throughout, so thank you. But there is one that was directed for Amy. Amy, what made you realize law school was not for you, and how did that lead to FMH?
That's a good question. So during my undergrad, I did a whole program over the summer studying for the LSAT. I took the LSAT. Then my last year, I was doing an internship working with a judge. And I kind of just realized that just the day-to-day life I really got an inside look at like what the day-to-day life would be of being an attorney. We were in court, seeing both parties arguing, on a daily basis. And I just realized for me personally, I knew that I did criminal justice for undergrad. I really liked the criminal justice system. I really liked the law, but I wanted more direct contact with people. I wanted to be able to more directly influence a person's life rather than, and attorneys do that in a way, but this was just kind of, just something felt off. And then as the more research I did, when I found this, I was like, oh, this is exactly, everything that I want professionally. So that really informed the decision once I found that there was, a better alternative that seemed to suit what my goals were.
Thank you. There's another question here, and I wanted to just clarify. The question is it difficult to find a paid internship in New York City for 2,000 hours required for licensure? So Fiona, if you're referring to the hours you need for your license, that's actually 3,000 hours, and that's going to be a paid position. So that's essentially your full-time job that you're going to search and hopefully acquire once you graduate with your limited permit. So yes, it would be paid, and yes, it would be for actually 3,000, not 2,000 hours, just to kind of clarify that for you. Are there any other questions? This is really an opportunity to ask the panelists pretty much anything you want to ask. So does anyone have any questions?
I'd like to ask a question. I have the good fortune of knowing Chris and Shamara for a very long time. I had the privilege of knowing them as undergraduates, graduates, and now as professionals. Very, very proud of them. I would love to hear from you, Shamara, this path to the PhD. If you can share a little bit of insight around what prompted you to make that decision, and what are you seeing as what will be some of your career trajectories once you get the PhD?
So for me, I feel like the PhD is the finish line to my degree. So I have everything in order for that. But I also want to do the PhD so I could also become a professor in the field of mental health counseling. So to be able to speak to the students, to be able to guide them, something similar to what we're actually doing now, to help them on that path to get their license, to think about, is this the field for me? Because we have to understand that counseling is, in that profession, it's kind of different. You're opening yourself to listen to problems of other individuals, to deal with the crisis that they're also dealing with, and also trying to balance your own work life and your own personal life. So there's something called vicarious trauma that we need to be very versed on, because it is very real in the field of mental health counseling. Because if you don't take care of yourself properly as a counselor, you're not going to be able to service your clients to the best of your abilities. So being able to continue that route, become a professor in the field, and to be a mentor for the students as well who seek mental health counseling as a degree.
And the PhD will be in what?
Counseling, supervision, and education.
Okay, thank you so much.
I was just going through some of the questions, and there was a question about how do you obtain the limited permit. Actually, if you email me, I have a licensure FAQ document that I can send to you that goes through the entire limited permit and licensure process. Just so you know, you can start the application at any time, but you actually can't. There's one form that has to be sent to John Jay, to the registrar, and that can't be sent until you finish your degree and your degree's conferred. So just so you know, that is kind of the requirement for that.
I just want to add in real quick. Whenever you send in paperwork to it's the Office of the Professions, the State Education Department, always check every like 2 weeks or so, because even without COVID and before everything was slowed down, it took forever and they never got back to you. I know when I was applying for my licensure and sending everything in, there was a mistake I made somehow, which I don't know. I know I went over everything 10 times, but they didn't tell me. And then they said, they kind of just threw it to the side. And I only found out that they didn't even look at it because I called them after like 3 weeks of waiting and didn't get anything back. And they said, oh, there was a mistake. So we kind of just didn't do anything about it. And then I had to resend it and recheck and keep waiting again. So anything you send to that department, that office, always check and make sure they receive it, and then make sure they're still going to review it, because they will not get back to you.
The application's online now too.
Yeah, I was just about to say it's online now. So it's easier for you to be able to track it. It still takes a while because some of my supervisors waited months before they could have heard back for their permit.
I think it's taking around 3 to 6 months for students to get their permit number. And unfortunately, hours don't count unless if you're working for, I think it's actually, I emailed something about a student to this earlier. There's certain settings that you can, your hours will count prior to having your limited permit number. It's not recommended. The New York State Professions actually doesn't recommend it, and you have to be working for the New York State Department of Health or Office of Mental Health, and it's a responsibility of the supervisor and the applicant to prove the setting is exempt by submitting an operating certificate. So this is something that, you know, as the limited permit holder or someone who's applying for the limit permit would have to obtain through your organization or your company. Any other questions from anyone?
There are some new questions in the Q&A.
Oh, thanks. So So can you all touch on your externship process experiences a bit? I'm currently in the process of applying. I'd love to hear about what it was like for each of you. So
I can start about my externship experience. So for my externship, I went to the office. Well, as Naomi said that it's easier now to find an externship. I applied to the Bronx Task Mental Health. It took a while for me to get in because there was a lot of back and forth in the emails. And when I did get in, the admin, I'm not sure if she thought that I was an intern for her, but I had to make it very clear that I'm here for more clinical hours than administrative hours. So it's important to make it very clear because sometimes I don't think a lot of places appreciate interns. So you'd have to just make it clear that I'm here for my 600 hours. It has to be more clinical hours than administrative hours. And by advocating for myself, I was able to shadow the case managers and the psychiatrists on site.
thank you. Will, do you want to answer this?
Yeah, so the everyone that's there is doing their job to make the program or the setting or whatever it is run. And I worked in a lot of high crisis settings, so it wasn't necessarily a priority for them to keep on top of me. So it was more of my priority to make sure the experience was going to be what I needed the experience to be. So if you want to learn, if you want to be more involved and you want to do more things, ask, don't be afraid to ask questions. It's cliche, but it's true. There is no such thing as a stupid question. And a lot of times they're not going to offer you things. So just being there and watching, listening, observing, taking in everything you can, and putting yourself in situations and challenging yourself, that's really going to be the most helpful way to grow as a clinician. Because like we touched on earlier, it's not textbook. Every setting is different. Reflective listening and de-escalation and all these things that you learn look different in real time. So if you want to practice those skills and you want to be effective as a therapist across various settings, you have to try to immerse yourself in the experience as much as you can.
Chris, do you want to share your experience?
Sure. My internship was at the YMCA Counseling Service in Staten Island, and I actually did not even know they existed. But thank God there was actually another alumni who somehow sent out a mass email to the program saying that they were looking for interns and that it would be counted towards the limited permit hours and then eventually the licensure hours. So I applied, and honestly, working at the YMCA Counseling Service opened up my eyes to like how difficult it would be to sometimes help people, but that didn't stop me. I think one of the hardest things I had to do was realize that just because I'm ready to help someone doesn't mean that they're ready to get help. And when you're feeling like that, I think you're on the right track because it means you really do care. So as much as that feeling may bring you down or may like make you want to question yourself, I think it's good to question, but it's also good to like ask the right questions to yourself. Okay, how can I improve? What can I take away from this? Not, okay, what did I do wrong? Why can't they, like, why are they not listening to me? Or why am I not getting through to them? Sorry, one of the best things I learned about the internship was everything is a way to improve myself, not a way to take myself down. So I think that was something that helped me out a lot in doing what I do now and helped me when I got started.
Thank you. And Amy?
Yeah, I really agree with what everyone says. You know, it's really, I think, about making the most of the opportunity that you have. You know, like I really thought I was going to do treatments, and I said, okay, this is a really cool assessment experience. There's such a wide variety. I'm with these a very well-established forensic psychiatrist, a neuropsychologist. This is like a wealth of information that's just at my fingertips. Like, so I just got involved as much as I possibly could. I always took advantage and say, what kind of cases are you working on? Is there anything cool going on? What can I see? What can I do? You have this opportunity. So really just take as much as you can from it. This is a resource, a wealth of information that's setting you up for your career. And it's really, you get what you put into it, and it's there for you to take. You just have to really put forth the effort to learn.
There's another question, and whoever wants to answer this, by all means, just unmute yourself and start talking. Do you have any tips on figuring out what specific type of work within FMHC psychology you're passionate about and want to pursue? I know we can do many things with our degree. It's a very good question, Jesse. There is a lot of things you can do with this degree. So does anyone want to start? Chris, I see you unmuted yourself. Do you want
Yeah, I'll start that because I knew that my ideal population was working with adults. The YMCA counseling service, they also had programs for kids ranging from maybe like 7 to 10 all the way to teenage years, and I knew that wasn't really the population I wanted to work with, just because I knew a little bit about how I would be, and I knew that the adult population is where I wanted to focus my training on, and the population I knew I wanted to work with. I think there wasn't really anything that helped me figure that out. It's just I kind of just knew that about myself. I never really, I sounds mean, but I just never really wanted to work with children. I just think other people might be more suited for it. It's not something that I really wanted to do, but I knew that from the beginning. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think that's just the only way I can answer that. It's just a little bit more direct about it. I just knew I didn't want to work with a specific population.
But what about anyone who, like Jesse, had many interests and wasn't sure if they want to work with children or adults, victims, etc.? Will, do you want to?
So yeah, my resume is kind of all over the place. I've done a little bit of everything. I've worked with human trafficking survivors. I've worked with people who've ended up in the criminal justice system by virtue of having an intellectual or developmental disability. And then I've worked outside of the forensic realm. So don't necessarily limit yourself to having to work in a forensic setting. Clinical experience is clinical experience, and forensic settings look different. Victim advocacy is a forensic setting. Certain housing programs are forensic settings. So if that's where your passion truly lies, to stay within a forensic setting, it is broad. Like there's so much that can be done. There's so much to do. So again, working with adults and children, just bear in mind, if you do want to work with children, a lot of times you have to work with parents. So, and that's not something people necessarily always enjoy doing. So yeah, I think trying a little bit of everything as much as you can do, dabbing your toe in the water, talking to other colleagues about what they find in their settings to be enjoyable, to be challenging, to be an opportunity to thrive. Like talk to your peers, talk to your friends, and don't just, what works for someone else may not work for you, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't get their perspective and learn from their experience. And like Chris said earlier, don't be afraid to fail forward. Every opportunity is an opportunity to learn. Failures, just because you don't get a job or because you feel like the setting wasn't for you doesn't mean this field isn't for you. It just means you haven't probably found your niche yet, and there's so much to be explored.
Anyone else want to share their insight on this one? If not, we'll go to the next question.
Oh, sure, you can go.
I was just gonna say, I feel like we'll kind of sum it up to it, but I'll definitely say you can definitely explore the different populations that are out there. I have experience with both the homeless population, the substance use population, ATI, aside of just counseling and with children and families. Before, I always used to say, oh, I want to work with adolescents, I want to work with youth. Now I'm working with everybody. Now I'm working with everybody. And it's something I love. To me, I just want to work with anybody that needs the services right now, that needs the help. Sometimes they come in and it doesn't seem like they want the help, especially with the mandated programs. You might find a lot of people try to mandate treatment. There's no way to mandate treatment. Treatment has to be something that the client is willing to accept. And unless that acceptance is not there, it's not going to happen. So I think for me, I felt the passion when I was like, I'm just ready to help whoever is ready for the help, but also meeting the clients where they're at. So it's definitely good to use internships to figure out where you kind of fit in, where you want to fit in, to be able to service the clients. As Will said, if you work with children, you have to work with the parents. You're not just going to work with the children alone. Even with some of the adolescents I work with, we had family sessions as well, because you have to get consent from the families with anybody that's under the age of 18.
Yeah, just to go off of all of that, there's so many different things you can do. So it just really comes down to doing your research, talking to people to the extent you can, get exposed to as many different types of populations and treatment, that's available. That's really the only way to kind of narrow it down, see what kind of piques your interest, what makes you feel inspired and passionate. That's really the only way to figure out, is by doing it and kind of seeing what works for you, what doesn't. So just try to do the research, get involved as much as you possibly can.
Great for everyone. There's one more question, which I'll ask in a second. We have around a little under 10 minutes. So if anyone does have any additional questions they're interested in asking, please put your question in the Q&A right now. The next question is FMHC a well-paying job? So, Shamar, I see you're chuckling. So, do you want to start with that one?
I would say it depends on the organization that you're in. So we know nonprofit is in the name. Nonprofit, not for profit, you're not going to make as much as you would make if you're in a private practice. It all depends. So you think of what you want, like where you would want your scale to be. There's some nonprofits that it all depends on the grants. Nonprofits gets grants. It depends on what they're able to offer. I know some nonprofits for the front staff, the salary has actually become higher from when I actually started. So, there's appreciation of the nonprofit. But if you're looking for something more substantial, your route might be private practice.
Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, I have friends who they didn't do the community mental health thing. They didn't do the nonprofit thing. They went they interned at private practices and then they worked at a private practice. So they went right. But for some of us, again, it goes back to your values. What's going to be important for you as a clinician and as a provider? Is the money important to you, which is totally fine? Or is it more important for you to be impactful? Is it more important for you to be in the trenches? It really depends what your values are and what you're looking for. And there is money to be had, but for me personally, when I first started out, I didn't want to work with the word people. I didn't want to hear about people, day-to-day struggles of being stressed at work, or husband and marital stuff. So it really depends on what you want to be doing. If you want to be an advocacy for BIPOC or LGBTQIA plus or any of that, it depends where your passion lies, and what your values are is going to dictate your career path and how much money you can make.
And I think even generally speaking, even in a private practice, this field in general, you really have to love what you're doing. It's not like finance or IT or something where you're walking out making like 200K. Like you really have to love what you're doing. Making money can't be the priority to feel fulfilled in this area. it really, it really does need to be about the ultimate goal of like the greater good, helping people. Obviously in private practice, there is more money working with non-forensic people, in a more affluent area would make you more money in a private practice, but then you're not working, you're losing kind of the forensic piece, you're losing the social work piece, the working with the community, kind of that greater good piece. So overall, it really is kind of, you have to have passion for it. Money can't be really the number one priority in this field.
Which it shouldn't be that way because it's still a noble profession and it's still worthwhile and we should be paid what we're worth, just like CEOs are and doctors are. And it shouldn't have to be we're so noble and humble that we take pennies and scraps. It should be that we're paid, but we're like everybody else. And hopefully, as in our lifetime, we see the parity change between physical health and mental health.